I asked Senator Adam Schiff here last week when the subject of Trump's sliding poll numbers came up. Okay, but how are the Democrats going to blow it this time?
There's a category of political disaster that never makes the highlight reel the way people expect. No explosive confrontation, no dramatic walkout, no moment where someone slams a fist on the table. The most revealing interviews happen quietly, almost gently. And that's exactly what made this one so difficult to look away from. Bill Maher didn't arrive with an agenda printed on his sleeve. He arrived curious, almost leisurely, the way someone does when they already know where the conversation is headed, and they're in absolutely no rush to get there. One question, a pause, a small smile. And then, right there under studio lights, a carefully constructed political identity began showing its cracks. This wasn't a takedown. It was something more unsettling than that. It was an unraveling. And if you want to understand why a single late-night conversation became a kind of cultural mirror for an entire era of American politics, you need to see how it actually happened, because the first uncomfortable moment wasn't even close to the most damaging one.
A statement from the administration. The president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama.
Here's what people miss when they analyze this exchange. The trap wasn't in the question. The trap was in the rhythm. Schiff had clearly done this 1,000 times. The measured tone, the careful phrasing, the practiced calm of someone who has spent years navigating hostile hearings and hostile media without leaving fingerprints. It's a real skill. But Maher wasn't trying to beat him at that game. He was changing the game entirely. Instead of attacking, he listened. Instead of pushing, he waited. He let the answer land fully before reaching into it and pulling out the thing that didn't quite fit. That shift in dynamic, from sparring partner to quiet surgeon, is what changed the energy in the room. The audience felt it before they understood it. Something was being exposed, layer by layer, without a single raised voice. And the moment the quote landed and the reaction came a half-second too fast, everyone watching understood exactly what they were seeing. Not argument, reflex. And those are very different things.
Statement from the administration. The president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
Well, Obama made the argument initially that he could go into Syria without an authorization. I and many others pushed back on that argument. Ultimately, he did not go forward with going after Assad, even though Assad was gassing his own people, because he thought he might lose the vote in Congress. But I respect the fact that was important to him, and the fact that he did not have the support of Congress meant that we weren't.
What followed was the kind of pivot every trained political communicator reaches for when the clean answer stops being available. Nuance, history, procedural context, legal framing, all of it real, all of it relevant, and all of it being used at that moment as cover. The problem with deploying complexity as a defense on live television is that cameras don't just record what you say, they record why you're saying it. And Schiff, in that moment, looked less like a man presenting a legal argument and more like a man buying time. Maher kept doing what he does best. He refused to follow the detour. He kept steering the conversation back to the simplest version of the question. Not the framework, not the procedure, not the constitutional nuance, just the outcome. What did all of it actually produce? That's the question polished politicians hate most, because it's the one that can't be answered with a position paper.
I mean, the Mueller report is, at the end of the day, that firecracker that, goes up and then the one that fizzles. Oh, look, nothing. Do you think you guys relied too much on that?
Look, I was always of the opinion, number one, that the Office of Legal Counsel opinion that you can't indict a sitting president was wrong.
Oh, good.
That, in fact, you can indict a sitting president. You I think there are prudential reasons not to try someone who's the President of the United States, but particularly when there's any risk of the statute of limitations running. If the President commits a crime, they should.
And here's where the weight of the moment really settled in. Because hanging over every word Schiff said was a memory the audience hadn't forgotten. Years of certainty, years of buildup, years of language that said unmistakably that something historic was coming, that accountability was just around the corner, that the evidence was overwhelming, that the story was moving toward a particular ending. People organized their political understanding around that promise. Then the ending didn't arrive. And once you've made the scoreboard the whole story, you don't get to walk away from the scoreboard when the numbers don't go your way. Maher wasn't just interrogating one claim in one interview. He was pulling an entire chapter of political history back into the room and asking plainly what happened. That's what made it feel bigger than two people on a stage. It felt like a reckoning with a whole era, one that ended not with a bang, but with a kind of prolonged, embarrassed silence.
This was our big gun. Now it just looks like you're stalking him. I think in the eyes of the people who don't follow it that closely, which is most of the country, here's the thing about Bob Mueller. He's like the last person, maybe the last thing in America that left and right agreed on. Left and right basically agreed. This is a guy of honor. This is an honest guy. This is an honest broker. Whatever he says goes. Americans are not into details. Don't read it to me, Bob. Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. The fact that he was like, ugh.
But then came the turn that was somehow stranger than everything before it. Because as Schiff moved into the territory of impeachment strategy, the logic began to collapse under its own weight in real time. Every option described led to the same wall. Act and lose. Don't act and lose. Escalate and energize your opponents. Step back and look like you folded. It's the kind of strategic dead end that sounds almost reasonable in a private briefing room, but under studio lights, narrated out loud to a national audience, it lands completely differently. It sounds less like strategy and more like someone explaining why they're stuck. Eloquently, formally, thoroughly, while remaining entirely stuck. Maher recognized that the argument wasn't being made stronger by more words. It was being made more transparent. And he kept pressing, not because he was enjoying it, but because the question underneath everything was now impossible to ignore. If this was the plan all along, what exactly were people supposed to be cheering for?
I'm not there yet on impeachment. I may get there, he may get me there. But here's the awful dilemma that we face. If we don't impeach him, that sends a message that this kind of conduct, this obstruction of justice, this kind of willing use of the help of a foreign adversary, all the lies and cover-up, that this is non-impeachable. At the same time, if we do impeach him, and he is acquitted as he would likely be acquitted, then the message is those are not impeachable offenses.
That's when Maher turned to the question that cuts deepest for any career politician. Strip away the central cause, the headline issue, the defining crusade, and what's left? Can you talk about the cost of living? About healthcare bills that arrive before the diagnosis makes sense? About housing that prices out the people who grew up in the neighborhoods they can no longer afford? That's the test. Not whether you can recite a position, but whether you can speak about ordinary life with the same energy you bring to extraordinary scandal. And the hesitation, however brief, said something. It suggested that years of operating inside a single defining narrative had made everything outside it feel secondary. Viewers felt that, not as an accusation, but as a recognition. A political identity built entirely around one opponent, one investigation, one promised resolution, is a fragile thing once that opponent is no longer the organizing principle of the national conversation.
I don't have a clue what you think about healthcare. I've never heard it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're for Medicare for all or improve Obamacare or get a chicken. I don't know what. I don't know what.
Here's what I was telling my colleagues.
And then the conversation surfaced something that the internet picked up on almost immediately. Hidden inside the exchange was a quiet, almost accidental admission that the very issue Schiff had made the center of his political identity was now apparently something campaigns were being advised to downplay. Think about what that means. You spend years making one mission your defining purpose, your brand, your reason for national prominence. Then your own side quietly concludes that leading with that mission costs more votes than it wins. That's not a messaging problem. That's a credibility problem. Because if the issue was truly as urgent and essential as it was presented, if it really was the fight for democracy itself, why would the political calculation ever suggest keeping it quiet? Maher didn't let that contradiction disappear. He held it up. And under the lights, it looked exactly as uncomfortable.
You know, I mean, it's amazing the way we have these elections, and it seems like when I look before the election, boy, the ammunition that the Democrats have to fire is just, God, they're just loaded. And then it doesn't work. Why doesn't this message land?
You know, it landed in November of this last year in the special elections. We were disciplined.
Then Maher pulled back the lens even further, and the interview stopped feeling like a conversation about one politician and started feeling like an indictment of an entire governing philosophy. California, a state with every natural advantage, the climate, the coastline, the universities, the industries, and yet a state that has become, for many Americans, a cautionary example rather than an inspiration. Housing costs that push working people out of cities their parents built. Businesses making calculations about whether it still makes sense to stay. A slow, steady outflow of residents who aren't leaving because they stopped loving the place, but because the place stopped being livable. And when the response to that reality sounds more like a communications strategy than a governing correction, people stop being frustrated and start being done. Maher was pointing at something that goes beyond party labels. When the place you represent becomes the evidence against your argument, you're no longer debating policy. You're defending a verdict that's already been written.
Part of that question is that California, I'm sorry to say this, a beautiful state, has become Exhibit A in progressive misgovernance. And if you're going to tax industries straight out of the country, if you're going to continue to lose, 100,000, 200,000 people every year who have to leave here because it's unaffordable, because housing is unaffordable, you're going to create an example of what Americans don't want from the left. So Democrats, and my colleague Ezra Klein is doing this, are taking a good hard look at California and saying...
The conversation then drifted into territory that felt almost absurd alongside everything that had come before it. The kind of cultural debate that makes people feel simultaneously that nothing is serious and that everything is broken. And that contrast became the sharpest point Maher made all night. Not that the cultural issue itself was irrelevant, but that the proportion of energy directed toward it, while the larger structural failures piled up, told voters something that no speech could walk back. People aren't angry because politicians fight symbolic battles. They're angry because politicians fight symbolic battles with the same urgency they should be bringing to the real ones. That's the feeling Maher was naming. Not that one side is evil, but that somewhere along the way, a generation of political leadership got better at performing concern than actually resolving it.
Let's get this straight. It's not me who's changed. It's the left, who is now made up of a small contingent who...
So here's what this actually was. Not a rough night. Not a media moment that will be forgotten by Thursday. This was something closer to a public audit, of a political style, a political era, and a political promise that was made loudly and repeatedly to millions of people who were paying attention. What Maher exposed wasn't incompetence. It was something more complicated than that. A genuine belief, sincerely held, that had calcified over time into something indistinguishable from performance. And once that happens, once the crusade becomes the brand rather than the cause, the whole architecture becomes vulnerable to the simplest possible question. What did it actually deliver? people can make peace with being wrong. Politics is full of wrong turns and honest miscalculations. What people struggle to forgive is the sense that the lesson was never learned, that the same language is still being used, the same certainty still being projected long after the audience already moved on. That's the image this clip leaves behind. Not a villain, not a warrior, just a polished, intelligent, deeply experienced political figure, standing in the aftermath of a story that ended differently than advertised, still delivering the closing lines.